Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. I'm Lauren Morton, and I'm here with Molly Taylor.
Hey everyone.
And this week we are bringing on our weekend editor, Jody Macgregor, to talk about game music, because Jody has some history with being a music writer, actually before being a games writer. So he has a lot of good knowledge about the landscape of gaming music. And mostly we're kind of just going to pass around some of our favorites, right? Talk about some of the best soundtracks out there, how they've changed, what we were obsessed with as children. You know how it is. You put a song on repeat.
All the good stuff. Yeah, we somehow managed to make 3 time zones converge somewhat conveniently for this episode. So please appreciate the 14-hour difference between all 3 of us in making this episode happen.
The sun never sets. But before that, Molly, what did you do last week?
Well, Lauren, I'm actually really excited this week. And you're sat down, but sit down.
Okay, I'm sitting.
Because I played not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. I played 5 new games this week.
Hello?
Right? Who is she? Like, what is this? I am a new person. I played 5 games this week, which is wild to me. This is just like not a me thing at all, right?
No, that's so much.
Yeah, I know. So I bought the Humber Bundle Cozy Games bundle first of all. I bought that. And I played the Cat Cafe Manager game out of that because I had a weekend of no internet. And it turns out there's a lot of games that you can't play online when you have no fucking internet. So Cat Cafe Manager was my weekend of no internet game. That is what kept me like relatively sane throughout having zero connection to anything. I also started to play It Takes Two with
Yeah.
It is so fun.
Isn't it?
It's so good. It's amazing. We're having so much fun. We're only about 3.5 hours in right now. But we are having like so much fun figuring out the puzzles. Like we're working really well together. Like he plays off my weaknesses and like vice versa. Like his strengths are my weaknesses. My strengths are his weaknesses. It's going very well.
Nice.
We have not
that first boss battle does not mess around though. When you get to it with the table saw, isn't that the first one?
Oh, that's the second one. That's the second one. Yeah.
Okay. I just remember getting to that one. I was like, oh, this isn't like for kids. Like this is actually like this requires some planning and some like spatial awareness. Like this is not an easy boss fight.
Yep, it is straight up for adults. I was like panic running in circles at one point because my boyfriend had died, and the game is quite generous, to be fair. It's like if you die, you can res within like 5 seconds or something stupid like that. It's like very, very generous with how I think otherwise it wouldn't be as much fun. But you can do a lot of experimentation, right? But he was dead. And the like little arena was just gradually getting like so tiny. This is like right at the end, and I'm like panicking. It was really good though. I'm really having so much fun with that. And then on the flip side, I also played Exoprimal, which it sure is a game. It sure is a game. That's all I have to say about Exoprimal.
Glowing praise.
Yeah, it sure is a game. How many is that? That's 3, right? I also played Sticky Business, which is a brand new. Yeah, it's like the little Etsy sticker shop. Like you can create your own stickers, sell them online. Played that. Fantastic. Loved that. That was like just really chill, super relaxing. I had a whale of a time with that. And then what was my 5th game? I definitely played 5. Oh, I played I think Baldur's Gate 3 was my 5th game. Was Baldur's Gate 3 my 5th game?
I don't know.
I can't really say that I played it because
you turned it on in early access to what, mess with the character creator, or
I turned it on. I spent like 3 hours in the character creator, and then I quit out of it. So
you know that like the rest of the races are getting added after early access, right? There's gonna be just like so much more to play with. You're just gonna have to do it all again.
Yeah, so I basically just went into the character creator because we're so close to the release now that I didn't really want to kind of dedicate like too much time
Hmm.
uh to it. So yeah, those were my 5 games. I can't believe
I
what
can't believe
happened.
you played 5 games.
I've
Dang.
been so excited to tell you. I have been so excited to share this information with you. So yeah, that's me. I
And
am
what
a new
range,
gamer.
too? She's got range.
Yeah, I do. Oh, I'm so good. So did you play much this week?
Let's see. Did I manage to play 5? Because so I was away
You
last
were.
week, and I was away from my PC. I did not play really any games. I played like a spot of Mario Golf on a friend's Switch, but really I was playing board games, which I don't get the chance to do very often.
Oh,
Not a big board games person, but I will play them with particular friends. And we may have played 5 board games though, come to think of it. We played
oh,
Everdell, the like Forest City Manager one. We played Pan Am. We played Mahokenshi, which is also a city manager. I think it was Mahokenshi.
oh.
We played the Baldur's Gate version of Betrayal. And we played this investigator thing with another countdown timer that was like supernatural Cthulhu themed. I forget what it was called, but you're like all on a team as investigators. That's 5. I did play 5 board
Yeah.
games. Um, and I think what I have learned is that like betrayal. I don't know if you've ever played the like mansion betrayal or whatever it is. I don't know the main game's name that there are spin-offs of. It's long and involves a lot of pieces, and like there's so much chance involved in like who ends up being the betrayer and like what their situation is.
I think I have
Um,
played it.
that and the Cthulhu one, like very long, very, very intensive setup, very reading lots of things, and you're never going to learn all the rules. You're just, no matter how many
Mm.
times you play, you're stuck reading the rules for that scenario. Like you can never learn enough. So I think Everdell I really enjoyed. I think that one might have been like a Kickstarter or something back when it started. I don't remember. People talk about Everdell though, and I enjoyed that. I enjoy resource management, city buildy things. That one was very cute and fun and had lots of like combos that you could wind up playing for like um, builders that you would put places and get different buildings or different critters to manage your city and make it to fall. So anyway, Everdell had a very good time. I think that was probably my favorite of the things we did. But I also managed to play 5 games. How about that? Good work.
Look at us. Look,
Yeah.
I mean, you play a lot of different games anyway, but I'm so proud of both of us, especially board games as well. I didn't know you weren't much of a board game person.
Yeah, I'm not. I just don't really end up owning them. It's an
Mm,
expensive hobby, right? Like, and I already have a
it
couple
is.
of those games. Video games are already an expensive hobby. So, yeah, I just don't wind up really playing much in the way of board games. But it was a good time. Good weekend off playing not digital stuff. So,
Hell yeah.
yeah. Now we're going to bring in Jody from across several ponds from both of us to talk about video game music and soundtracks and all of our big faves, the stuff that gives you goosebumps, the live music, the excellent things.
Yes.
Okay, Jody, tell us why you are the one here with us this week to talk about music. You have a decent history with music, right?
Yeah, I own lots of albums, so I must be musical, right?
Yes.
I was a music journalist before I was a games journalist, so I spent a few years working for a music magazine and was like the nerdiest guy on the magazine, which is why they gave me the gaming section, which eventually sort of just took over my job because it was honestly more exciting. But uh, that meant that like there was a solid period there where I was writing about music and about games, and that meant I got to write about music in games a lot because
Mhm.
it was just easy to do the crossover thing.
I don't think I knew that particular detail. I knew you had been a music journalist. I didn't know that you had like moved into writing about specifically like game music and games while you were still doing that. I thought you made just like sort of a jump generally. So, what were you doing reviewing music for games generally or like covering news? Like what were you doing at that time?
Well, like so, the first game that I reviewed for the music magazine was Audio Surf because it was easy to like
Oh,
convince them,
nice.
let me review this. It's about music.
Yeah.
And I would interview people like Austin Wintory and game composers and stuff like that. Whenever like Austin Wintory came out to Australia after doing the Journey soundtrack and did like the live orchestral tour for that music. So that was a big deal at the time, like both in video game circles and more generally. So it was easier to convince them like this deserves space in the magazine. And I found myself doing more and more of that and realized, oh, I'm just like convincing these people to turn this music magazine into a games magazine. Maybe I should just be writing about games.
Yeah, Journey was like sort of pivotal with, I mean, you're explaining how it was pivotal for like getting games into another area, but it was also very pivotal, it feels like, for game music. Does that still feel true to you? I mean, I don't want to assign it like too much importance in the history, but it really feels like that was a point at which people were like, oh, like, I mean, Halo's always had a great soundtrack, but it was when Journey came out that like everybody was like, oh shit, game music, right?
Yeah, I remember that being like the first thing that got the serious sort of orchestral live treatment. The first time that there were world tours for a video game composer with an entire orchestra that he brought with him. Um, and now, right, like now they do like Monster Hunter on tour and stuff. That
Yeah.
sort of thing that really began with
Mhm.
Journey.
Yeah, wasn't it the first to win an award of some kind? Am I making that
Grammy,
up?
I think
It,
it
it won a
was.
Grammy, and it was the first game soundtrack to do that, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think like they had like a BAFTA for game music before that, but
Hmm.
Grammys, it was the first one.
Okay, yeah.
Super
Well,
cool.
with that then, like just generally speaking, because all of us really enjoy like soundtracks, game, like whether it's symphony or whether it's like old style chiptune stuff, what do you guys have as far as like personal favorites? Either something you've just like played forever or something that like really makes the mood of a particular series. You can go ahead,
Go
Molly, if
ahead,
you want
Jody.
to.
Go first, Jody. As the guest, you go first.
Okay, well, I was going to say that I really like Darren Korb's music from like every Supergiant game.
Oh
Hades
yeah.
has an amazing soundtrack, but sort of Bastion was the first video game soundtrack that I really sort of like fell in love with as an album. I think he called it acoustic. Was it acoustic frontier trip hop? Was his description of it, which is the kind of thing you can get away with saying when you're a professional musician. But it's like it's great music to listen to on its own, and it's really elevated in the game. There's that one level where you can hear someone singing as you're walking along, and you only realize halfway through, like working through the level, that it's an actual person in the same level as you. Like it's was it diegetic music? It's actually there.
Oh.
Someone in the
Yes.
world is playing that song, and at the end of the level, you meet them. It's not just the soundtrack, and that kind of stuff is really neat.
And that's like the end of Bastion, right? That happens in.
I think
Is that what you were talking about?
no, it's like it's when you meet the girl whose name I can't remember, and she's singing "Build the Wall,"
Oh,
and
yeah,
then like
yeah,
she
okay.
comes back with you to your hub. But
Mhm.
the end of that game has an amazing
Is
song
also
as
very
well.
impactful. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Molly, what about you?
Yeah,
Big favorite?
for me, God, it's like which JRPG do I pick from, right? 'Cause I'm such a sucker for JRPG soundtracks. I think like Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy X was like the first one that I really fell in love with. Those are the first games that I like actively remember downloading the songs for, like finding the songs and downloading them and putting them like on my MP3 player.
Mhm.
But maybe like recency bias would shift me more towards like either Final Fantasy 14 or Persona 5. I play those two soundtracks like a lot just when I'm like traveling. They're on a lot of my Spotify playlists. I think those two for the last like couple years have been my most played soundtracks. They're both very good soundtracks in their own
What
right.
is Personas like? Because I
It's like
assume Final
kind of
Fantasy 14 is like orchestral symphony type deal, right?
yeah, so Final Fantasy 14 has a lot of different stuff. Final Fantasy 14 is it's mostly orchestral, but then they have like some really good like rock like alt tunes in there as well.
Okay.
And then some like kind of gentler things, but Persona 5 is very like jazzy. It leans
Oh,
quite
that's right.
hard into kind of like a popped up jazz sort
Mhm.
of soundtrack, which is it is so good. I love it because Persona 4 was more kind of J-poppy in its vibe, and then 5 went like very very jazz centric, and it's so good. It's so good. I love it.
Jody already mentioned Supergiant's music, so I won't harp on about that again. But that is like, I think that's a lot of people's personal favorites for sure. One that I've played actually so much in my time. I spent an entire summer working in an office playing the soundtrack to Dust Force over and over again, which is an indie game that I don't think many people know. It was this platformer that's about like janitors. But the soundtrack is by Lifeformed, who has most recently done the soundtrack for Tunic, the Small Fox adventure game, and a couple other things. And that is a very oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's very electronic, I suppose, but it's got like some heavy beats going on that you can just like really chill and get in the groove. And it was like very perfect working music. I think I found out like partway through that summer that the beat in my headphones was audible to the people around me, so they could tell that I had been listening to the same songs over and over and over again. Shout out to Cider Time on that album if you want just like an excellent chill music. And then I admitted to Molly recently on this podcast that I had a history of putting the discs of JRPGs as a kid, like in my GameCube or PS2, and waiting for the start screen to load up the music, like to just like um, go into its like away mode, right, of playing the game's big theme song. And I did that with like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles and like Kingdom Hearts for sure, because everybody loves
Yes.
simple and clean. And the opener for Crystal Chronicles is also this like sung bit, a very nice jaunty adventuring tune. It's a good time. Um, have either of you guys gone to see like live renditions of game music?
Don't. This question gives me so much grief. I have never been to a video game concert. I have wanted to go for such a long time, and my big ones have been like, either Distant Worlds for Final Fantasy or the Eorzean Symphony for Final Fantasy 14, right? And I tried to get tickets for the Eorzean Symphony, the Final Fantasy 14 concert earlier this year. It's a game that means a lot to me. I've spoken about it a lot on this podcast. I was like sat on the floor of like a shopping center, like a shopping mall. I think I just bought like a pair of shoes, and then I'm like sat outside the store on the floor, like desperately trying to get tickets. And I got tickets, and they were in my car, and I was like crying. I was crying. I was in like that phase of like deep brain rot. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. And I went to pay, and the website just crapped out. It completely crapped out, and the tickets disappeared from my cart, and then the tickets sold out, and I have not been able to get a hold of any tickets for this concert that's happening in October. It's like 2 weeks after my birthday, so it was going to be like a little birthday treat to myself. And I'm still upset about it. Like, I can't listen to the music from Final Fantasy 14 at the minute without feeling like slightly
Robbed.
upset at this. Yeah. Like slightly upset at the whole situation. So I have not been yet, despite my efforts.
That is tragic. I'm
Upsettingly.
sorry.
Yeah,
Jody,
I'm
have you ever
upset.
been
It
to
is
anything
tragic.
live?
No, I haven't. Because I missed out. I forget what I was doing working. I think I was working the night that like the Austin Wintory concert was on. So I've never been to see any of those sort of like orchestral shows.
That's the one I have been to. It was PAX West that I was at with friends, and was also kind of working while I was there. I think it must have been in 2019, I think, that there was a live concert night that Austin Wintory was there composing, or not composing, conducting the Supergiant Games like live show. So Austin Wintory, who did Journey soundtrack, was there conducting with um, Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett doing their vocals alongside like a symphony of all of the Supergiant games. uh songs from like all of their games, which of course was just like magical. And when you go to something like that and you know their um, like whole track history, you can't not spend the entire time going, when are they going to do the duet between Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett that comes at the end of Bastion, the build the wall, dig, what I forget exactly what the title of it is, but you know which one I'm talking about. When are they going to do it? And of course, that's what they ended on. So you just have like goosebumps, and you're like, oh my god, it's so magical
Oh.
to hear it live. It was so wonderful. Um, and that's all like really modern stuff, like some of the latest like being treated to symphony orchestra things in games. I guess Jody especially, how do you feel like things have changed stylistically in the last like, I don't know, 20 years or something? Like we get symphonies in games now, we get like excellent electronic music, like chip tunes were way back, and they sort of like would emulate that symphony sound or like big music. But do you think we see more kinds of styles? Like Molly's talking about the jazz and Persona. There's all sorts of different stuff. I don't know if you think there's more variety than there used to be or some other change.
Yeah, I think there is. I remember, like at the start of the CD era, there was definitely a period where like suddenly video game music had vocals, and sounded
Oh,
like
okay.
CD quality, and
Yeah.
so like it went orchestral after that and started to sound more like film scores and less like a bunch of cheerful bleeps and blonks, and like it took a while after that for it to move beyond copying what movie soundtracks sound like. Like, as soon as they got the ability to sound as good as a movie score, that was obviously what they wanted to do, and it was great. But there's also a lot of stuff that you can do that maybe suits video games more specifically. Um, Even going way back, I was a huge fan of the Silent Hill games music. Akira Yamaoka does this great stuff where he samples really weird and off-putting noises and works them into like the boss fights. And I think it's in the first Silent Hill. You're in like a haunted school, and the he samples the sound of chalk squeaking down a
Oh.
blackboard. Uh,
Ugh.
and in like the final boss fight, there's a pitch shifted dentist's drill whirring away in the background, and you don't know, like when you're playing that, you don't know what it is. You just know like that is the most uh, unsettling noise I have ever heard. And it's like, yes, it is. It's the noise you associate with going to the dentist. No wonder you feel terrified right now. Uh, you know, like it's not the sort of horror movie strings and haunting piano that you expect to hear, but it
Yeah.
suits the medium. It suits a video game horror perfectly.
That's a much more like internal unconscious horror reaction than, what you've been taught belongs in horror stuff. Shout out to the Foley recording artists for unsettling creative noises, right?
Yeah, because
um
that does sound horrifying.
yeah, Molly, have you noticed any big changes in the last like however many years of game music?
Yeah, I was actually sort of thinking, the same thing a little bit. I had, thought that I think especially now soundtracks do a much better job of fitting the game that they're for a lot better. I think like Jody was saying, I couldn't quite pinpoint in my brain why. I think it's just like you said, Jody, like they were trying to make it sound like movies back when they were like, oh shit, we can do that now, but then it didn't always quite match the tone of the game, I guess. But now, like you could play like three different games and they'll have three completely different styles, and it like matches really well. Like I don't think, like a grand orchestral score would suit like Stardew Valley, for example, right? That's kind of got that like slightly like computerized country twang to it. And I really like that. I think it really suits the sort of like pared down pixely style of the game. And then you've got, like Elden Ring, which does have that like huge like kind of thunderous orchestral score to it during the boss battles, which feel like really, really suitable. And I really like that. And then something else I thought about was like the onset of licensed music as well, right? Like
Yeah.
you just couldn't really get that where and I think that the use of that has died down somewhat over the last few years. I feel like it really peaked, I want to say, in like the mid 2010s. I feel like there was like a lot in like the mid to late noughties, and then there was a lot again in like the early mid 2010s, and I feel like we don't get it as much at the minute. Maybe I'm just not playing the right games. I feel like there's a lot of soundtracks now that blend in like the original soundtrack and then like a little handful of licensed songs. And I think it works
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. I think other times it doesn't. Like the end of Final Fantasy 13, the Japanese version of that had a completely different song. I forget who sings the ending for the Japanese version of Final Fantasy 13, but the English version, it's Leona Lewis, who I don't know how well Leona Lewis is known outside of the UK. She was like an X Factor contestant and she won. And then it was just like her song was kind of like thrown into the English version of Final Fantasy 13 and it felt very out of place. I still don't understand that choice.
Let's see. Oh, are there any particular games that you guys feel like were just completely made by their soundtrack? I mean, obviously games should be good games too, but I think there are definitely some that it's like this would not have even been like nearly as cool as it was without like what the music was able to do for it.
Oh, that's a good question. Because I was trying to think on this. I was trying to think on, games where I don't think they would have been like maybe mid without the soundtrack. And I couldn't really think of ones that would have been mid without their soundtrack. But one soundtrack that I've been thinking about this week before this podcast has been Bioshock's soundtrack, right? Because I tried to go back and listen to that soundtrack just on its own. That is not a soundtrack that you can listen to just like casually while you're like tippy tapping away at your work because it's so atmospheric. Like it
Mhm.
I can't like quite explain how like much that soundtrack elevates the overall experience of just being in rapture and navigating this like quite scary quite scary underwater city. And it's one of those where you almost like don't notice it's there because it's so like immersive with like the world that it's trying to capture, right? And I just think if you took that soundtrack out, it wouldn't be like half as terrifying as it is. I think it goes such a long way to create such an immersive atmosphere. And I hate the word immersive, and I just used it like 5 times. But I just think it's a fantastic soundtrack that does a lot of justice to the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd forgotten how good Bioshock's music is. Like all of the Bioshocks, I think.
Yeah.
Even like in Infinite, the stuff they did with the pop music that gets like reinterpreted. You have like
Yes.
the bit with the guys, like a barbershop quartet singing a Beach Boys song,
God
"God Only
only knows.
Knows." That's amazing. That's like the high point of the whole game. Honestly, I just stopped and sat there and listened to that entire song play out.
It is
Dang.
fantastic.
I think for me, it's got to be like my personal pick for our Game of the Year awards last year in 2022 was Road Warden, which I talked about in my write up for that being just like the perfect intersection between an adventure game and a visual novel in a way that just like actually grabbed me for the first time, probably ever. Because Molly, I struggle with visual novels. I can't. I would rather
Yes.
just read like an actual novel if it's well written, and if it's not well written, obviously I don't want to be there. But Road Warden was fantastic, and part of what sells it so well, it has a great visual identity with like the sort not exactly two tone, but it's got that kind of vibe to it. And then the soundtrack is this like very mellow, muted, acoustic guitar kind of like background deal that just like threads through every different area. Like in every place that you're in, some of them has like crickets and bugs that you hear, and then you go to another area and it has like this particular guitar track, and it just really sets the mood of every screen that you travel to in that world. Some of them are more adventurous and exciting, and some of them are very low key, and some are just a little bit spooky. It just does such a freaking good job of like selling the atmosphere. And the other one is Katana Zero, like slightly deep cut, that I
Oh.
reviewed years ago. Like Jody, you may have even been the one to ask me to review this. It would have even been like you or Wes back, rip to the indie channel on PC Gamer. But Katana Zero is this fantastic platformer that involves like a rewind feature. It's very, very cool, but it has a character who has a not a Walkman. Is it called a Walkman when it's a cassette tape? I don't remember
Yeah.
anymore. It's been so long. Okay, they have a Walkman. I grew up in CD Walkman era, so I was like, wait, were they called Walkmans before that too? So the protagonist has a Walkman, and at the beginning of every level, he slaps a cassette tape into it, and it plays the sound, the track that was done for
Oh, that's
that
super cool.
level. It is super cool, and I should look up the name of the artist. Katana Zero soundtrack, because I don't remember off the top of my head, and that feels like the kind of thing. Yes, so Bill Kiley and Ludowick, I think, did most of the songs on that album, and they are jams. I don't know a better way to describe it other than very jammin' electronic. Like there's a club level and there's whatever else, but that's like excellent, excellent. That like totally made the vibe of that game too. Um, Jody, do you have any music that like or games that like changed what your taste in music actually was, or like introduced you to something new?
I do. I used to play a lot of racing games, and racing games have some great soundtracks. Like any
They do.
driving game, like uh, I've spent a lot of time driving around in Grand Theft Auto just to listen to whatever radio station I wanted to listen to and not actually doing any missions. But when I was into the Burnout games, I think it was Burnout 3 was the one that had the soundtrack full of mid 2000s indie rock and emo, which I was not like that into at the time. But from just hooning around, smashing cars in slow motion, I got really, really into like My Chemical Romance and Franz Ferdinand and the Von Bondies and like every band that was on that soundtrack, except maybe Fall Out Boy. But every other band that was on that soundtrack, just I ended up owning like all of their albums. So that was a big influence on Baby Jody.
Yeah, I'm really glad that it's not just me that racing games had an influence on. I feel like they were just those soundtracks were so good in the 2000s. Because when you said Burnout, I was like, oh my god, it's like Need for Speed Underground 2 was like my racing game. Like that got me into Queens of the Stone Age, that got me into Skindred. I finally got to see Skindred live like last month, and it was amazing. And then they played the song that was in Need for Speed, and I was like, oh my god, it was amazing. I forgot like how much of a chokehold like rock music in video games had on me, and how much that like shaped my music taste. The Guitar Hero games introduced me to a lot of like classic rock, and stuff that I was the My Chemical Romance girly, I was the Panic at the Disco girl, the Fallout Boy the Fallout Boy girl, but I wasn't really like that aware of the classic rock, and Guitar Hero did a lot to introduce me to like those songs as well, right? And then I feel like narrative games in the 2010s also did like an, an immense amount to really sway my music taste. The Life is Strange soundtrack, genuinely fantastic. Those sort of like indie coming of age type songs, they are like a regular rotation in more than one of my playlists. I love that soundtrack. And even like Tales from the Borderlands had some fantastic, fantastic intro songs because they would always play like a little song at the beginning of each episode as they like rolled the credits. And uh Busy Earnin' was the song by Jungle that played. I forget which episode it was, but that like kickstarted a love for Jungle, and they're like one of my favorite artists now. And it's nice because, you know, video games, like I said, licensed music doesn't always work, but I think it does a lot as well, like to help introduce you to music that you might not have otherwise listened to, right? And I feel like that's a really kind of neat thing about games.
Yeah. I don't play many types of games that have licensed music in them, honestly. So I haven't had a lot of chances, I don't think, for games to like influence my more generalized music taste. I guess I will say I feel like certain soundtracks have like clarified for me what it is that like does it for me in a game
Yes.
soundtrack. Like Divinity Original Sin 2, I love the like symphony orchestra like type vibe that has, and there's one particular song in that soundtrack I will listen to over and over and over again uh, that helped me figure out, I think, that it's like the brass section. It's like I love
Ooh.
a good string bit to a symphony like soundtrack, but frankly, it's when the horns come in that I'm just like beside myself. I figured that out with like Divinity Original Sin 2, and then when like the one of the reveal trailers for like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom came out, and you hear the like na 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 coming, and it's the whole brass section, and I'm just like
Yeah, I
uh
think I'm a piano girl. I think piano
yeah.
is what gets it for me. You know, the is it the Whiterun like nighttime music in Skyrim? And it's got that like
Oh,
very gentle like piano that plays. And that always gets me. I think I'm the piano sections is always what entices me.
Jody, do you have a particular instrument that just does it for you in the soundtrack?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I have to confess though, I turn the music off in Skyrim, and in fact all the Elder Scrolls games, which like I know is heresy for some people, but
You've played enough of them at this point that maybe.
I guess, but it's also the way that they have the combat music that kicks in like as soon
Oh,
as an enemy sees you, and it's always the
boom,
same
boom.
combat music.
Woo, ha, woo.
It's like a spoiler. Like I always know when I'm about to be attacked because like the music kicks in. I'm like, all right, pull out the bow and turn around, and then there's five
And it's a
wolves. Like,
mud crab that's
I was
20
just saying,
feet away
little,
from
or
you.
that
little
one mud crab. Bum, bum, yeah, one mud crab. I hate it. So I just turn the music off. I put my own music on instead. I never listen to the actual scores of the Elder Scrolls games. So
oh,
Yeah, do you have any other games that you will like just turn the soundtrack off for? Not because it's bad, but maybe you've like heard it a lot in your life. I have a couple of those. Do you, Molly?
nope. I
No?
I really I don't know. I really struggle to focus if I'm not like listening to the game as it's intended to be listened to, if that makes sense. Like if I just put on like my normal Spotify playlist while I'm playing through a game, I can't focus. I don't know why. I don't know what like does it for me, what the issue is, but it's just I don't know. I feel like I need like the full encapsulated experience. Right. I can sometimes do a little bit of crossover maybe. So like if I'm playing like a cozy game, I can maybe listen to like the Animal Crossing soundtrack or something like that. I can I can like maybe do a tiny bit of crossover, but for the most part, no. I just can't do it.
I just unlocked a memory. I don't know why I forgot about this, but I was thinking about like MMOs when this question came out of my mouth 60 seconds ago. But then as you were speaking, Molly, I remembered I played so much Dark Souls 3 that at a
Oh.
certain point I was like, I'm done with the soundtrack now. I think I like loaded up some random Spotify playlist, and there was a point at which you're like walking up the stairs of a castle in the freaking rain, and like Bottom of the Deep Blue Sea by Missio came on, and it matched me walking up the stairs so perfectly that I turned off the game soundtrack, built an entire Spotify like playlist of just like mood music for Dark Souls that I now just listen to all of the time. I mean, it's full of like Halsey and like Bishop Briggs and Bastille and things like that, and like Hosier and I don't know. There's so many things. Zella Day. Anyway, an entire just like edgy sad alt rock playlist for Dark Souls that I have named Edge Souls, and now I sort of like live by that playlist. Actually, do you guys have game soundtrack, game music playlists? I have more now that I'm thinking about this. I have more to divulge. Do either of you guys have any though?
I've
Nope.
stated my case.
This
Yeah.
is just
No?
this is just you, Lauren.
This is just me.
I did listen to like a lot of just random instrumental metal while I was playing Skyrim because it seemed to fit, but I didn't build a playlist.
No. Okay, I have the one called Edge Souls, and then I have one that's called Game Taverns, which is just tavern songs from games.
Okay, I
That
do love that.
Dragon
it's
Age does have some great tavern songs.
yes, so Dragon Age is on here. There's like a particularly good one, like the Bard songs from Inquisition are really nice, and they're on here. I have the like several Witcher songs are very good, like jaunty tavern type things, even the ones that aren't played in taverns, and like Skyrim and um a couple things from Divinity Original Sin 2. The tavern music in that is fantastic and I love so much. So I don't know, I guess I kind of forgot and then reminded myself as we were speaking that I have like a lot of game soundtrack playlists.
You know you
on
have to
my
like
list.
drop that playlist to us now because I need that playlist desperately.
I did at one point on Twitter take a screenshot of everything I had in the Game Taverns playlist and solicit additions, and a couple people did give me good options. But I'll drop it to the two of you and see if you
Yeah.
have
I
any.
do need that.
I need
Okay.
Lauren's lo-fi songs for taverns.
Definitely need it because
I actually didn't put any bardcore in here because it didn't like it didn't like I don't know.
it
I
wasn't
like
the vibe.
bardcore songs. Yeah, it just wasn't the vibe for this particular playlist. But I do enjoy bardcore. They do the like, medieval renditions of like pop songs, but
Pop
also like there's
songs.
some
Yes, I think I like those too because like I don't have playlists for playing video games, but I do have video game playlists for doing activities, right? So I have
okay.
like a gym playlist that's full
Mhm.
of video game music. I'll have to like go out and pick like the right song for the right lift, and I listen to a lot of video game music when I'm working because I struggle with vocals in my ear while writing. It's
Yeah.
like having someone talk to you while you're trying to like think and write at the same time. No, there's too many words in my brain at once, and there's already a lot of words in my brain. So I tend to
Mhm.
listen to a lot of like Animal Crossing music mostly, a little bit of Stardew music as well.
Please tell me you listen to Animal Crossing while you're lifting.
Do you know what? I really should, shouldn't I? I should start putting on like KK Slider songs while I lift.
Ba, ba, ba.
Yeah, I'm on the wrong vibe. I should start doing that.
What is like, do you have a number one song for a particular like associated with an activity, whether it's working out or something else?
Mostly Tekken music.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, fighting game music is very good for lifting, and that is like almost always what I go for. But Megalovania is also it's a really good it's just a really good lifting and cardio.
Okay, meme lord.
It's really good. I don't know why. It's just like it's very soothing to me. There's this amazing like cover artist called Jeff Plays Guitar as well, and they do like all these kind of like heavy rock metal covers of video game music, and they did one for Megalovania, and it's very good. And
Nice.
that's the one that I tend to listen to when I lift.
Jody, do you have a song that goes with an activity in real life from a game?
I guess I do have working like music that I listen to when I'm writing, and like you said, Molly, it has to be instrumental stuff because lyrics are too
Mhm.
distracting. Or I can get away with it if like the lyrics are not in English. If it's like Japanese, that's fine.
Yeah.
But recently, the soundtrack to Dark Tide has been great work
Ooh.
music for me. Like
Mhm.
I've been playing that. Like I stopped playing that game a while back, but I still play the music on the regular. Uh, it's this. It's hard to describe. It's like medieval monks who are cyborgs and really like a gloomy electronica, like because there's vocals in it, but they're not singing words, or if they are, maybe they're in Latin or something. It's just like a lot of weird low chanting and like boom, boom, and like Trent Reznor beating up a drum kit in the background kind of stuff. It's like, industrial medieval monks in the 41st millennium is what it sounds like. It's great. It's really motivational.
It sounds incredible.
I think it's the Road Warden soundtrack that I mentioned earlier for me that like that's my like work writing music lately. It's very good for that. But Terminal March on the Bastion soundtrack is like a perfect 6 mile an hour speed on a treadmill. I learned one summer. Like
Oh, really?
your leg length may vary, so adjust accordingly. But for my particular stature, that is a 6 mile an hour. Ding, 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 ding. Just it just goes and that's like a not a short song, it's like a 4 minute, so I would like put that on and be like, okay, this is your 4 minute sprint on the treadmill, bump it up to 6 miles an hour, let's go, cupcake. um do you guys have like, okay, we've talked about playlists, but like radio stations in games, any particular favorite ones?
I feel like Grand Theft Auto is the master of like
Yes.
in-game radio stations, right? No one does it like Rockstar does it. And
Talk about licensed
GTA,
music.
yeah, they know what they're doing. And GTA 5, I love non-stop pop. Cara Delevingne grates on me after a little while because she's the radio host, right? And like I can't be doing with like Cara Delevingne in between the songs after a while. I do like that one, but my ultimate radio station in a video game. Now, I don't hate country music, but I don't have like a particular affinity for it, right? There's something about it that I feel like if I listen to country music, it's normally like ironically, no offense to people that enjoy it. I just there's something about it where I can't take it too seriously. But I fucking loved K Rose in GTA San Andreas. It had like the most ridiculous country songs on it. It had like All My Exes Live in Texas is one of them that I cannot, like, even to this day that song stays in my head. And there's no, it's like, is it Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man? That's another one, right? I don't know what it is about that station, but I would just drive around again, like you were saying earlier, Jody, just like driving around just to hear the music in the game. I would do that all the time. I don't think I ever finished San Andreas because I would just drive around and listen to K-Rose all the time.
Yeah, it was definitely GTA 5 that was like the first time I was listening to an in-game radio station, and I was like, what is this? I need to like go find this and like put it in a playlist, keep it or something. And it was Old Love, New Love by Twin Shadow that's on one of the radio stations. I don't remember anything else. I just remember that song has stuck with me. It's a very like sad kind of low-key jam, but I really enjoy it. What about you, Jody?
Um, I do. I really like the radio stations in the Saints Row games as well. Like they have some great
Yes.
metal stations, like Static X, I think, is the one that I listen to a lot. But you're talking about San Andreas, and you reminded me that I used to listen to Playback FM, which was like the old school hip hop station in San Andreas, because there was like one of them was like the new one of them like the gangster rap station, and then Playback FM would play like De La Soul and all of this like Daisy Age 90s like positive hip hop. And uh, I had forgotten this, but I used to write a hip hop column in a rave magazine, and I called it Playback FM in reference to that. I'd forgotten that.
Oh, that's so
That was the
cool.
station that I listened to as I drove around. Like completely inappropriately murdering people. It's like the wrong music for drive-bys. There's a whole gangster rap station like right next to it on the dial. But instead I would be like, yeah, De La Soul. It's like when you listen to classical music, but you steal a car and you're listening to whatever is playing on the station, and you jump in and
Yeah.
you race off and it's playing the classical station, and you're like, this is inappropriate, but it rules. And like 5 cops are chasing you, shooting you, and you're like, yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
going to listen to Beethoven while this happens.
Why
It's
Yeah.
like
not?
that.
I would always
I
change the radio station.
yeah.
Yeah, I would
I
always change it.
Shout out to also Fallout, because I feel like you can't not mention Fallout for in-game
Oh
radio
yeah.
stations. Because like that's not licensed music. Obviously, that's all stuff that's done for Fallout. Or well, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. It has like actual classic songs in it. But those definitely have personality. I think everybody's gotten "I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire" stuck in their head at some point, either from the trailer for Fallout or just from playing around. Oh, and I think particularly New Vegas songs that really stuck in my ear because they have that twang, Molly. They're not country songs exactly, but they've got that vibe.
They got the bang.
Johnny Guitar,
Yeah.
love a Johnny Guitar. Oh man, Johnny Guitar, and then there's some other one that I'll really get to, and it's not coming to me at the moment. But yeah, excellent radio stations in Fallout for sure. Let's see, Molly, you wanted to talk about like adaptive music, like layered stuff, right?
Yeah, because when we were thinking of, what to talk about on this, on this podcast to do with music, and I was trying to think of the different types of music in games, right? And then like I was thinking, like there's some really good use of adaptive music in games as well. And like, I think about like The Sims is very good at this. The Sims 4 does it. Especially like the build by mode and the create a sim mode. Like in build by, you might like not be in any menus and it'll be like very gentle. You know what I'm on about. It'll be like very gentle, and then you like go into a menu and it's like do do do, and it like starts building up like a little bit more and more and more, and then the little vocals come in, the little like oh no, and I love that like little build up, and then you back out of a menu and it like like pulls back a little bit. And I don't know, it keeps my brain engaged. I don't
I'm
know
gonna be
why.
honest with you, Molly. I've never noticed that effect in The Sims. Like
Have
I
you never
kind of
noticed it?
no, I've never paid attention to how it like changes contextually. I don't think that ever really clicked in my brain. I didn't realize at all.
You need to go and play The Sims 4 after this, and you need to come back and report to me.
I guess so. Jody, do you have any that like change contextually that stick out to you?
I think the first time I ever noticed a game doing this, I don't know if it was the first time a game did this, because it was way back. It's Need for Speed 2. Like, God, how old is that? That's real old. Anyway, that game had a thing where the music was mixed at like 3 different levels. So when you're at the back of the pack, when you're losing, you hear the worst version of the music. You can just hear like the percussion and some bass basically. And then as you move up through the ranks, you get like different mixes and the intensity picks up. It's the same, you're hearing the same music, but it just
Yeah.
builds and builds. And then when you're in first place, like the guitar solo kicks in and you can hear like the full mix and all of the instruments, and it's great. It's like, it's such a reward. It really makes you want to like stay out in front for the whole race if you like whatever song is playing.
Yeah, because
That's
you feel
very
it,
cool.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you like drop to last place and all the music goes away and it's like, oh, I fucked up.
Yeah, you feel
Yeah.
like you're like outside the club listening to it through the wall and you're like, oh, this is embarrassing. I got to do better.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about like what an emotional impact like certain songs can have on you, and yeah, that like totally seals like the emotional experience you're having throughout that race, right? Of like getting into first place, and then the guitar comes in, and you're just like, oh hell yeah! Like that's a really cool effect. I don't know if but maybe I just don't notice this as much because I know it's a very cool thing that's capable, like games are capable of doing. The thing that came to mind may not even be a proper example is again Divinity Original Sin 2, where I know they have alternate versions of each character's like the game theme. You choose an instrument, and it will play your like character theme in that instrument instead of one of the other ones, every time it
Oh,
pops up in the soundtrack, which is not like the same thing because that's a thing you choose and then it sort of stays the same throughout the game. And I don't know if it does any like context adaptive stuff at all. But I do
That's
like
cool though.
that it does that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's still pretty cool.
It is very. I love the soundtrack for Divinity Original Sin 2, clearly. Do you guys have any like um I guess which like theme song music, like game start menu? Like I feel like some of those are very emotional experiences. You start up a game and you have this like forever like nostalgia, like emotion connected to that start screen music.
Yeah, 100% Kingdom Hearts for me.
Yeah.
100%. It's like this again, it's the piano. The piano like speaks to me. It's I think it's called Dearly Beloved. Especially in Kingdom Hearts 2 as well, because it's a lot gentler. Like Kingdom Hearts 1, the like the Dearly Beloved start music is it's not harsh, but it's it's quite like heavy on the piano keys. And then in Kingdom Hearts 2, it starts with like a very like kind of delicate string section from what I remember. Like very, very delicate. And then it's a lot gentler on the piano. And that like that will always live rent free in my head. It's beautiful. So good.
What about you,
I,
Jody?
uh, when I was a kid, I my older brother had, or my old stepbrother had like a 10-year-old Commodore 64, and uh, like we've mostly been talking about newer sort of sounding game music, but I do have a real soft spot for the bleepy blonky sort of chip music of the 80s and 90s, and the sound like the intro music for Pool of Radiance, like the real early Dungeons and Dragons game on the Commodore 64. It's just like this 4-minute epic of like bleeps that are trying to sound like pianos, but it's wonderful. Like it's what Dungeons and Dragons sounds like in my head. Uh,
Yeah.
and the chip for the Commodore 64, it was really impressive what they managed to get out of it because it only had like 3 channels. So if you want reverb on something like that, if you want an echo, then that's you have to move that sound between 2 of those channels. And that's you've got 1 channel left for everything else. So they'll just be cramming a whole bunch of instruments into whatever channel was left over. So you end up like the really busy sound, but also like a rich sound. And they were doing crazy stuff with modulation of having like multiple frequencies happening at once to sort of bend those chips in ways to make them sound better. But even though they were, very primitive, like little, just a chip trying to pretend to be a synthesizer, they did some amazing stuff with them.
I think like personal favorite territory probably has to be like Dragon Age Inquisition, just because I have this very specific memory of like waiting till midnight when that game launched and loading it up and seeing all the Templars marching towards like into this valley, and the soundtrack that comes in at that point is just like beautiful and haunting, and I love it so much. But also I have a real soft spot for the Halo 3 like title screen music, and I couldn't name it for you off the top of my head, but
Is that
that
the
also.
one? Is that the one where like loads of boys used to film themselves like in the bathrooms of schools?
Oh, probably. Like for sure.
That's gonna sound fucking insane if yeah, that one.
There was back in the old days of YouTube, like 4x3, like 240p YouTube, 2005 or whatever year, there was a particular like garage metal band that did a cover of the Halo theme, that I listened to a lot of times over and over again. Could I find it again? Is it lost to the internet? I don't know, but definitely have memories of doing that. Like, yeah, big favorites. Any other like big favorite shout outs you guys have before we wrap
Hmm. Yeah,
on
shout
any
out to
axis?
yeah, shout out to Killer Instinct Gold on the Nintendo 64. One of the first games I remember like the hearing the music for, like my parents would play like Sonic and I don't have much memory of that, but I do remember having Killer Instinct Gold in my tiny little hands for the first time. And did Mick Gordon do the original Killer Instinct Gold soundtrack, or did he just do the 2013 revival version? I don't remember. but I just remember like the slightly like kind of computerized like guitar shredding, and it's so good. It's so good. And it's just so like epic, and I really like it. It goes hard. I love that title music.
I love to hear a computer trying to sound like a guitar. The original Doom games had these great Bobby Prince soundtracks, and apparently John Romero just like gave their composer a stack of like heavy metal and hard rock albums and said, "Here, make them sound like these." But Bobby Prince used to be a lawyer before he was a musician, and so he knew like, well, I know how much I can make my music sound like this and not get sued. And so if you listen to Doom and Doom 2, so much of that music is like, sounds kind of like Metallica. And like,
It
put them
does
side
sound
by side, it sounds a lot like Metallica. There is Doom 2 Map 23 Barrels of Fun, I think it's called, is like Them Bones by Alice in Chains just on a loop. And it must be like to the second the most amount of Alice in Chains you can get without getting sued. But it is like so close to legally actionable. But it sounds amazing. It's so memorable because that's just a whole level of like corridors full of barrels that explode, hence the name.
I love the mathematic approach to legally distinct, not licensed music. Beautiful. Shout out to Gerudo Valley, one of these songs in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time made my childhood. Speaking of playlists, I have a Spotify playlist that is only covers of Gerudo Valley. It's just that. It's the same song over and over and over again. Favorite on there has to be an a cappella joint by Smooth McGroove, I think is his name. It's excellent.
Sounds amazing.
I have admitted to my playlist sins, and I did not really expect to be doing that. I had no idea. Thank you both for sitting down to talk about beautiful game music, the emotions it makes you feel, and some excellent bits of history.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Bye.